long before he became known as the Apostle Paul. Before his missionary journeys, before his letters shaped the future of Christianity, he was known by another name, Saul. His story began in the city of Tarsus, one of the most important cultural centers of the Roman world. Located in the region of Cilicia, in what is now southern Turkey, Tarsus was a prosperous city where commerce, philosophy, education, and politics intersected. It was a place where Eastern traditions met Western ideas, where Greek culture flourished under Roman authority. Saul was born into a Jewish family, yet he grew up surrounded by the influence of the wider Roman Empire. This unique background would later play a crucial role in his life. From an early age, he learned to navigate different cultures, languages, and worldviews. He was a Jew by heritage, a Roman citizen by birth, and a man educated in a world shaped by Greek thought. His family belonged to the tribe of Benjamin, one of the historic tribes of Israel. They were deeply devoted to the traditions of their ancestors and committed to preserving the law of Moses. Saul was raised with a strong sense of religious identity and an unwavering respect for Jewish customs. As a young man, he demonstrated exceptional intelligence and determination. He excelled in his studies and quickly distinguished himself among his peers. While many children learned only the basics of the scriptures, Saul immersed himself in them. He memorized passages, studied interpretations, and developed a deep knowledge of the sacred texts that governed Jewish life. Eventually, his education brought him to Jerusalem, the spiritual heart of Judaism. There he studied under Gamaliel, one of the most respected teachers of the law in the first century. To study under such a renowned scholar was a privilege reserved for the most promising students. Under Gamaliel's instruction, Saul became highly trained in the traditions of the Pharisees, a group known for its strict observance of religious law. The Pharisees believed they were protecting the faith of Israel from corruption and compromise. They carefully followed religious regulations and sought to maintain purity in every aspect of life.
Uphold the sacred laws.
Saul embraced these ideals with passion. He was not merely interested in religion, he was consumed by it. His commitment was intense, sincere, and uncompromising. As the years passed, Saul's reputation continued to grow. He became known as a zealous defender of Jewish tradition. He viewed himself as a guardian of the faith, someone called to protect God's people from teachings he believed were dangerous and misleading. Then a new movement began to spread throughout Judea. It centered around a man named Jesus of Nazareth. Although Jesus had been crucified, his followers claimed that he had risen from the dead. They proclaimed him as the long-awaited Messiah. Their message spread rapidly through Jerusalem and beyond. More and more people began joining what became known as the Way. To many religious leaders, this movement represented a serious threat, and to Saul, it appeared to be a dangerous challenge to everything he had devoted his life to defending. At this stage of his life, Saul could not imagine that one day he would become one of the greatest champions of the very faith he opposed. He believed he was serving God. He believed he was protecting truth. He believed he was on the right side of history. But his life was about to take a turn so dramatic that it would become one of the most remarkable transformations ever recorded. The zealous Pharisee from Tarsus was about to begin a journey that would change not only his own life, but the course of history itself. The movement that began after the death and resurrection of Jesus was growing faster than anyone expected. What started as a small group of disciples in Jerusalem was becoming a powerful force that could no longer be ignored. Men and women from different backgrounds were embracing the message of Jesus. Thousands were joining the community of believers. The apostles preached openly in public places, and reports of miracles spread throughout the city. To the followers of Jesus, these events confirmed that God was at work. To Saul, they represented a growing crisis. From his perspective, the movement threatened the religious foundations of Israel. The followers of Jesus were proclaiming that the crucified Nazarene was the Messiah. They taught that salvation came through him. They preached forgiveness of sins through faith in Christ, rather than through strict adherence to the law. Saul viewed these teachings as dangerous. He did not see the believers as sincere worshipers of God. He saw them as people leading others astray. Every new convert, every public sermon, and every growing gathering convinced him that decisive action was necessary. Unlike some religious leaders who preferred caution, Saul believed the movement had to be stopped before it spread further. His zeal became increasingly intense. The book of Acts later describes him as a man breathing out threats and violence against the disciples. The language paints the picture of someone completely consumed by his mission. Opposing the followers of Jesus was no longer merely a religious disagreement. It had become a personal crusade. Saul devoted himself to identifying believers and helping suppress the movement wherever it appeared. As opposition against the early church intensified, one figure emerged as a particularly powerful voice among the believers. His name was Stephen. Stephen was not one of the original 12 apostles, yet he quickly became known for his wisdom, faith, and courage. He spoke boldly about Jesus and defended the Christian message before both crowds and religious authorities. His words attracted attention, and eventually, they attracted enemies. Religious leaders brought accusations against Stephen and arranged for him to stand trial before the Sanhedrin, the highest Jewish council in Jerusalem. Witnesses claimed he had spoken against the temple and against the traditions of Moses. The charges were serious. Standing before some of the most powerful religious leaders in the nation, Stephen delivered a remarkable defense. He recounted the history of Israel, spoke of God's faithfulness throughout the generations, and challenged the leaders for rejecting God's messengers. Then he said something that shocked the entire council. He declared that he saw heaven opened and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. The reaction was immediate. The council erupted in fury. Covering their ears and shouting, they rushed toward Stephen. Dragging him outside the city, they prepared to execute him by stoning. Among those present stood a young Pharisee named Saul. Although he did not throw the stones himself, he approved of what was taking place. The men carrying out the execution laid their outer garments at his feet, while they hurled stones at Stephen. As the attack continued, Stephen prayed. He asked God to receive his spirit. Then, in words that echoed those spoken by Jesus on the cross, he prayed for forgiveness for his attackers. Moments later, he died. Stephen became the first Christian martyr. For the early church, his death was a tragedy. For Saul, it appeared to be a victory. Rather than softening his heart, the event strengthened his resolve. If anything, it convinced him that stronger measures were needed. What followed was a wave of persecution unlike anything the young church had yet experienced. Believers were forced from their homes. Families were separated. Many fled Jerusalem to escape arrest. The movement Saul hoped to destroy began scattering across Judea and Samaria. Yet something unexpected happened. Instead of disappearing, the message of Jesus spread even farther. Everywhere the believers went, they carried their faith with them. The persecution that Saul believed would extinguish the movement was helping carry it into new regions. But Saul could not see that yet. Determined to finish what he had started, he intensified his efforts. He searched for followers of Jesus, entered homes, arrested believers, and sought authorization to pursue them beyond Jerusalem itself. His reputation as an enemy of the church grew rapidly. The followers of Jesus feared his name. To them, Saul represented danger. To the religious authorities, he was a loyal defender of tradition. To himself, he was serving God. He believed he was protecting the faith of Israel from deception. He believed he was doing the right thing, yet every step he took toward destroying the church was bringing him closer to the moment that would change his life forever. Soon, Saul would set out on a journey to a city called Damascus. He expected to find more followers of Jesus. He expected to arrest them. He expected to return in triumph. Instead, he was about to encounter the very person he believed was dead, and nothing would ever be the same again. Saul believed he was winning. The followers of Jesus were scattering. The movement he despised was under increasing pressure. Religious leaders trusted him. His reputation as a defender of Jewish tradition continued to grow. Yet despite his efforts, reports kept arriving from distant cities. The message of Jesus was spreading. One location in particular caught Saul's attention: Damascus. Situated northeast of Jerusalem, Damascus was one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. It served as a major center of commerce and culture, connecting various regions of the Roman Empire. More importantly for Saul, it had become home to a growing community of believers in Jesus. To him, this was unacceptable. The movement had escaped Jerusalem. Now it needed to be hunted down wherever it appeared. Determined to stop its expansion, Saul approached the high priest and requested official authorization to act. He received letters granting him authority to identify followers of Jesus in Damascus, arrest them, and bring them back to Jerusalem for punishment. Armed with legal authority and unwavering confidence, Saul set out on the journey. The road to Damascus stretched across dry hills and rugged terrain. The trip required several days of travel. Along the way, Saul likely rehearsed his plans, imagining the arrest he would make and the impact his actions would have. There was no sign of doubt, no indication that his beliefs were about to be challenged. As far as Saul was concerned, Jesus of Nazareth was dead. The reports of resurrection were lies. The claims of divine authority were blasphemy. The movement would soon be crushed. But heaven had other plans. As Saul and his companions approached Damascus, something extraordinary happened. It was around midday. The sun already blazed overhead. Then suddenly, a light appeared. Not an ordinary light. Not a flash of lightning. Not a reflection from the desert landscape. This light was brighter than the sun itself. It erupted around Saul with overwhelming intensity. In an instant, the persecutor who had marched confidently toward Damascus found himself thrown to the ground. The world around him vanished beneath a flood of heavenly brilliance. Then he heard a voice unlike anything he had ever experienced. It spoke directly to him. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" The word shattered everything he believed. Confused and overwhelmed, Saul responded, "Who are you, Lord?" The answer changed history. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Everything Saul thought he knew collapsed. Jesus was alive. The man he believed was dead was speaking to him. The movement he had tried to destroy was built upon a truth he had never imagined possible. The resurrection was real. The Messiah had not been defeated. The crucified Nazarene was alive, and he was standing before him in glory. Saul's entire understanding of reality was being rewritten in a single moment. The encounter was not merely emotional, it was deeply personal. Jesus did not ask why Saul persecuted Christians. He asked why Saul persecuted him. The message was clear. To attack Christ's followers was to attack Christ himself. The believers Saul had dragged from their homes were not abandoned. The risen Lord identified completely with them. Meanwhile, Saul's companions stood nearby in shock. They sensed something extraordinary had happened. They heard the sound of a voice, yet they could not fully comprehend what Saul was experiencing. The encounter belonged to him alone. Then the voice spoke again. Saul was instructed to continue into Damascus. There he would be told what to do next. The brilliant light faded. The voice ceased. Silence returned. But nothing was the same. When Saul attempted to stand, he discovered something terrifying. He could not see. The man who had arrived confident and powerful was now blind. The persecutor who intended to lead prisoners back to Jerusalem now needed others to lead him by the hand. His companions guided him the rest of the way into Damascus. The contrast could not have been greater. He had begun the journey as a hunter. He entered the city helpless. For 3 days, Saul remained blind. For 3 days, he neither ate nor drank. For 3 days, he sat alone with his thoughts. The man who had spent years defending his beliefs now faced a truth he could not ignore. Every memory returned. the followers he had imprisoned, the families he had terrorized, the believers he had condemned, Stephen's face as he prayed for his executioners, the courage of those who had refused to deny Christ. The words echoed through his mind. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Jesus truly was who he claimed to be. The realization must have been overwhelming. The foundations of Saul's life had been shaken. His ambitions, his reputation, his understanding of God, everything was changing. Yet these 3 days of darkness were not the end. They were the beginning. While Saul sat blind in Damascus, God was already preparing another man for an important mission, a disciple named Ananias. Soon, the fearful persecutor and the faithful believer would meet. And through that encounter, Saul's transformation would begin in earnest. The enemy of the church was about to become one of its greatest champions. The city of Damascus continued its daily routine. Merchants filled the markets. Travelers entered through the gates. Families went about their lives unaware that one of the most significant transformations in Christian history was quietly unfolding within their city. Behind closed doors, Saul sat in darkness. The man who had entered Damascus with authority and confidence now found himself completely dependent on others. He could no longer see the roads he had traveled. He could no longer read the sacred texts he had spent years studying. He could no longer rely on his own strength or certainty. For 3 days, he remained blind. For 3 days, he neither ate nor drank. The darkness surrounding him mirrored the turmoil within him. Until that moment, Saul had believed his life followed a clear path. Every decision had been guided by conviction. Every action had seemed justified. He had devoted himself wholeheartedly to what he thought was God's cause. Now everything had changed. The encounter on the road to Damascus could not be ignored. The voice, the light, the name, Jesus, the very person Saul believed was dead, had confronted him with undeniable reality. Questions flooded his mind. How could he have been so wrong? Had he misunderstood the scriptures? Had the prophets truly pointed toward Jesus? Had the Messiah come in a way he never expected? Every assumption that once seemed certain was now under examination. The memories returned one by one. He remembered the believers he had arrested. He remembered entering homes and dragging men and women away. He remembered the fear in their eyes. He remembered their courage. Most of all, he remembered Stephen. The image would have been impossible to forget. Stephen standing before the council. Stephen speaking with confidence. Stephen declaring that he saw Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And finally, Stephen praying for forgiveness as stones struck his body. At the time, Saul had viewed Stephen as a dangerous deceiver. Now he wondered if Stephen had been telling the truth all along. The thought must have been overwhelming. Everything Saul had spent years opposing now appeared in a completely different light. Yet while Saul wrestled with these questions, God was already working elsewhere in Damascus. Among the believers in the city was a disciple named Ananias. Unlike Saul, Ananias was not famous. He was not a religious leader. He was not a public figure. He was simply a faithful follower of Jesus. But God was about to entrust him with an extraordinary assignment. In a vision, the Lord spoke to Ananias. Calling him by name, Jesus gave specific instructions. He told Ananias to go to a particular house on Straight Street, one of the main roads in Damascus. There he would find a man from Tarsus named Saul. The command must have been shocking. Ananias knew exactly who Saul was. News of the persecutor had spread ahead of him. Believers throughout Damascus had heard why he was coming. Saul's reputation inspired fear. He was the man who arrested Christians, the man who approved of violence against believers, the man who had come to destroy the church. Ananias could hardly believe what he was hearing. Respectfully, he expressed his concern. He reminded the Lord of Saul's reputation. He spoke of the suffering Saul had inflicted upon believers. Why would God send him to such a man? The answer revealed a remarkable truth. Jesus declared that Saul was his chosen instrument. He would carry the message of Christ before Gentiles, kings, and the people of Israel. The very man who had tried to silence the gospel would become one of its greatest messengers. The persecutor would become a preacher. The enemy would become an ambassador. The destroyer would become a builder. Ananias obeyed. Despite his fears, he went. Step by step, he approached the house where Saul was staying. Imagine the tension he must have felt. Every believer in Damascus knew the danger Saul represented. Yet Ananias trusted the Lord's command. When he entered the house, he found Saul exactly as the vision had described: blind, humbled, waiting. Then Ananias did something remarkable. He addressed him not as an enemy, not as a persecutor, not as a threat. He called him Brother Saul. Those words carried extraordinary meaning. For the first time, Saul was welcomed as part of the very community he had tried to destroy. Ananias explained that Jesus, who had appeared to Saul on the road, had sent him. Then he placed his hands upon him. Immediately, something happened. Scripture describes it as though scales fell from Saul's eyes. His sight returned. The darkness was gone. The man who had entered Damascus blind could see again. But far more important than the restoration of his physical vision was the transformation taking place within his heart. Saul had seen the truth. The risen Christ was real. The gospel was true. The Messiah had come. Soon afterward, Saul was baptized. The man who had once hunted followers of Jesus publicly identified himself as one of them. It was a decision that changed everything. His former life was gone. The path ahead would not be easy. Many believers still feared him. Many religious leaders would soon view him as a traitor. Both sides would struggle to understand what had happened. But none of that mattered now. Saul had encountered the risen Christ. And from that moment forward, his life belonged to a new mission. The persecutor had become a believer. The enemy had become a brother. And the man who once sought to destroy the church was about to begin proclaiming the very message he had fought so hard to silence.